Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of the Mega Man retrospective, where we're going to dive into the classic series of Mega Man, which I'm sure plenty of you are eager to hear my opinion about. Actually, you should have, started with this series, because it's the beginning. I don't know if you knew that, but I thought I should tell you. Who are you? My name is Actually Man. I was created by Dr. Wily to actually let people know about facts that they already probably know. I have a full database of facts from YouTube comment sections and Twitter. Wow! Get out of my house! Actually, this is an apartment, not a house. Oh no.
It makes me question why!
Okay, unwanted house guests aside, we're going to discuss the classic Mega Man series. Now, my first game in the classic series was actually Mega Man 8, which is naturally the 8th in the entire series, so that's a bit late. I think starting there would be a little silly. Though it was the 3rd Mega Man game I ever played, so you know that's relevant. But as with the X series, we have to go back to the beginning of this series, to the original Mega Man game, way back on the NES. Mega Man for the NES. This is what it's called. It's Mega Man. And to be brutally honest, there's not really too much to say about it. Naturally, it's a classic. I don't think anybody would argue that. And you have to give the game a lot of respect for what it is and what it did. We're talking about the original Mega Man game. Every single Mega Man game since then, no matter what series, no matter what context, no matter what it may be, owes its existence to this one pivotal game. So naturally, it's a little hard to look back and sneer at it in any way, because, I mean, to mock this game would be to mock the entire series as a whole. It's like mocking the original Mario Brothers, or the first Sonic game, or the first Final Fantasy. Like, yes, they're old games, so naturally they're not as good as modern games, but you have to consider the context at the time. A lot of standards when it comes to Mega Man were established here. To begin with, you know, you have Mega Man in general, just the overall design of the character. Oh god, not that one. Not the bad box art for North America. Oh, woo! Woo! I don't even want to look at it. That, there we go. That's better. That's a lot better. The side-scrolling, the shooting, the climbing, the Robot Masters, Dr. Wily, everything that we know about the classic series was really started here. Now, there are some differences when it comes to the original Mega Man when compared to later installments. I think the most blatant is simply that there's only 6 Robot Masters as opposed to the later standard of 8. 8 would be the standard for most games of the Robot Master / Maverick variety, where you get to choose what order you face the bosses in. However, the first game does not have 8, it has only 6. Why that is, I don't know. It was the first game. A lot of standards weren't established then. They didn't even know they really had a series, let alone a franchise back then, so, you know, it's not really something to complain about. Though I will point out that the remake on the PSP, Mega Man Powered Up, does add 2 extra bosses to, you know, standardize it with the rest of the series. The plot is pretty stock, and in fact, most of the classic series, I think it took till about 7 until the plot started getting, actually legitimately interesting. On the NES, the plots were just kind of there. 4 through 6 flushed them out a bit more, but the first few games, I mean, they were NES games. I mean, again, it's like complaining about the plot of Super Mario Brothers. Like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you ever do that? The plots back then on these games existed to fill just an excuse to run and jump. Like, that's what they were for back then. You couldn't fit one on the cartridge. So, again, complaining about that is silly. You know, Dr. Wily has a bunch of robot masters that he actually, in this game, stole from Dr. Light, and Mega Man has to go stop them and steal their powers, which is also something that would become a standard in the series. Determining which order you take the bosses in can determine whether or not you actually have that boss's specific weakness. Again, this is something that would become very consistent across the board with both Mega Man and Mega Man X, for that matter. Actually, his name is Rockman in Japan. Thank you. I'm aware. Why? Can you just stop? Just stop. Everything. I cannot deal with this ever. I literally anything but this situation. This is a pet peeve of mine. Please don't be that guy. You go through all the boss fights, you get to Wily's castle, you fight Dr. Wily, and you beat the game, you saved the day. Woo, everything's great. Is this game perfect? No. 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 Woo! Not at all. I respect it, don't get me wrong, but to say that this game hasn't aged well, I think would be fair. I'm sure I'm gonna get some flack for that, but compared to later installments, particularly the immediate sequel, the original Mega Man game does have some glaring flaws. I think the biggest one is the overall level design. The game's just set up like an arcade game. A lot of the levels aren't really taking into account the limitations of Mega Man, and sometimes the levels are just cruel, just unreasonably cruel, or just super tedious and annoying. Like Iceman Stage. This entire thing, these platforms, I don't know, there's a glitch where you could fall through them, and Electman Stage, no, this is also violently irritating, ain't nobody got time for this. No. So there were some kinks to iron out, is what I'm trying to say. And I really have to hammer home that I feel like this is more set up like an arcade or an Atari game. There's even a score system, which would be done away with immediately, because it's totally irrelevant. But I bring up the arcade thing because, like a lot of arcade games, it seemed to be designed as a coin guzzler, but since it's a home console game, it's just tedious as a result. Like, I don't need to be killed every 12 seconds, okay, is all I'm trying to say. Out of all of them, with the exception of one, I think this is one of the harder classic Mega Man games. And I'm not even sure that's intentional or not. I think it just wound up that way. Later installments would correct a lot of issues and make the games still challenging, but a lot more fair to the player. Particularly Mega Man 2. The fact we got Mega Man 2 at all actually is kind of a Christmas miracle, because the first Mega Man game, believe it or not, did not sell well. Part of the reason, according to Keiji Inafune himself, was the box art I mentioned. In North America, it just... Would you buy that? Because I wouldn't. I would take one look at that and think that's some kind of crappy budget title, or something that, you know, like not even a legitimate game. Like, it just looks ridiculous. And even Mega Man 2's box art, to be fair, doesn't look that great. At least outside of Japan. Whatever reason, I don't know what their deal was. It took till 3 to get decent box art in America, and even it still wasn't as good as the Japanese box art in my opinion. But the box art has nothing to do with the overall quality of the game, and Mega Man 2 is often considered by many people to be the best Mega Man game ever made, period. Now, I don't agree with that at all, but I can't argue with the game's quality. This is a great game. Easily one of the best, and for some people to consider it the best is not really a stretch. It is an incredibly well-designed game and one of my favorite games for the NES, if I'm being honest. Actually, if you don't think that this game is the best, you're wrong. The Robot Master amount would be standardized to 8. You still go through the game figuring out weaknesses for various bosses like before, and then you go through Wily's castle and defeat Wily. It's standard, but it's so well done, and it's set up so much for the rest of the series that it really, the rest of the games owe both the first one and the second one a debt of just esteemed gratitude for making the series what it became to be. Mega Man 2 sold incredibly well, and that had to be because of its pure, unspeakable quality. It's just such a great game. It's so fun. Even nowadays, I think for NES, it is aged quite well, especially when compared to the original. What I think is really funny about this game, and the series at large, to be brutally honest, most people, whenever they talk about the Mega Man classic games especially, talk about how so hard they are. God, these are just some of the hardest, toughest games ever made, and you're not a real gamer unless you can get through them all without dying once, like me. I'm the ultimate gamer. Yeah, that's what I tell the ladies at the bar. And I've never gotten any of their numbers, but like, I think I'm really close. Like I just don't think girls even know what Mega Man is. You know, it's all feminism's fault, is what it is. Yeah, that makes sense if you don't think about it at all. Anyway, but yeah, I'm a great at Mega Man. I'm so good. Like, every time Mega Man gets brought up, I swear that gets brought up. Just the difficulty aspect and how good the reviewer is at the games. Like, they have to justify themselves to everybody watching. Like, okay, look. I get that in my last video I mentioned that I'm good at the X games, but like, I feel like I was at least a little like more downplayed than most people seem to be, and who the hell cares? Like, it doesn't matter. You can still play a game and have fun without necessarily being great at it. I know plenty of Mega Man fans, and by plenty I mean two, that aren't really that great at the games, but still love to play them and love to have fun. And isn't that what gaming is all about? Does it matter how hard the game is? And the only reason I'm bringing this up now is this. Alright. Mega Man 2 is like a lot of people's favorites, and a chunk of those people, I'm not gonna say all, but a decent amount will talk about, oh, it's such a tough game, oh my god, I'm so good at it. Mega Man 2, I'm pretty sure, in my opinion, is the easiest classic game, period, in the entire series. And that's not a dig at the game. I need to stress this. I'm not saying that as a way to offend anybody or offend the game, as if it can be offended, it's not a real thing. My point is that Mega Man 2 is designed so extraordinarily well. It's hard, but it's not obscene. It's challenging, but it's fair. At no point during the game did I feel cheated or gypped or screwed over by something I could never have foreseen. Every difficult aspect of the game I felt was designed in a way to challenge the player, but not in a deceptive manner, if that makes any sense. There was no, getting off screen by random things coming up from the floor like a lot of NES games do. Even other Mega Man games do that crap. Everything in the game, with the exception of one part, was incredibly well designed in a way that would be challenging but fair. And I think that's one of Mega Man 2's strongest elements, is that it's accessible. Anyone who is familiar with side-scrollers could pick up Mega Man 2 and have fun with it. I'm not saying you won't die, because you will. You probably will. It's not like an easy game, but comparatively, it's the most fair. And because of that, in many ways, it is the easiest one. That's all I'm saying. If you got offended, then you need to check yourself, because man, it's a game. Come on. I don't care how good you are at Mega Man. I really don't. I can't overstate that enough. Oh yeah, I mentioned there is one part of Mega Man 2 that is unfair, and that's this room with the lasers. It's one of the Wily bosses, and why? No. It doesn't look like much, but here's the deal. You have to use frickin' Flash Bomb to break the walls, which is fine, except you can't break all of the walls because you also need to use the Flash Bomb to kill the lasers. So basically this amounts to you using Mega Man's toolkit that Dr. Light gives him as he progresses throughout the game in order to get around the room without actually breaking that many of the walls. You have to minimize this. All this entire time, the lasers are constantly shooting at you. It's a pain in the butt. And it really amounts to one of the major issues I have with the NES games, and this is not the game's fault. This has everything to do with the fact that, simply put, the NES controller doesn't have enough buttons. A lot of later Mega Man games took advantage of the fact that there were more buttons on the controller, so you could quickly switch between different weapons. But on the NES controller, you only had a few buttons to work with. Namely, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a D-pad. And most of those were already taken up by jumping and shooting and pausing. So you had to keep going in the menu to switch between your different weapons. This is extraordinarily tedious if you are in a situation, like this one, that is forcing you to constantly switch back and forth between your various tools. It's a pain, and I don't like doing it. I'm just gonna be real with you. Other than that one room though, the game is great. A ton of fun, absolutely a joy to play. I would recommend anybody, if you have to play only one of the NES games, while this isn't my favorite one, probably start with this one, because it is so easy to get into and have fun with. Mega Man 2 was an astonishing success and really catapulted the character into the limelight. Mega Man was suddenly a very popular name among NES players. Everyone knew who Mega Man was. Everyone knew someone who had beaten Mega Man 2 blindfolded in a back alley while a knife was held to their throat. They didn't die once. In fact, they didn't even shoot once. They beat the bosses without even fighting them at all. They were that good. They didn't actually verify any of what they said, but I believe them. So naturally Mega Man 3 happened, and this is where the series gets weird and confusing and hard for me to follow. Like, every game is technically different, but especially when it comes to the Robot Masters, it all blends together. Like, I have a lot of trouble keeping track of which Robot Masters were in each of these games. Capcom made it a point to constantly use the assets of the previous games. I don't think the Mega Man sprite, his running animation or anything like that, changes one time with the exception of new sprites added for new moves he can do. Beyond that, it's the same Mega Man every single game. And, you know, at least when Mario had sequels on the NES, Nintendo tried to make the sprites look a little bit different. I mean, I think it's, you know, can be easily said that Super Mario Bros. 3 looks a lot better than Super Mario Bros. I think that's fair. But Mega Man, well, certain aspects did change. There are a lot more colors in late games, particularly 6. 6 actually looks very nice for the NES, but the sprites themselves seem to be the same. Now, is that a bad thing? No, you have a good, repeatable system. Why mess with it too much? I get that. But this is one of the classic series' biggest issues, I feel, is that for a long time, and even sometimes nowadays, it seems terrified of evolving at all. If it does evolve, it becomes Mega Man X, and that's a different series altogether. But Classic just keeps being Classic for the most part, and when it does change, people that aren't me don't really appreciate it. But I'll get to that later. Mega Man 3 didn't add too much in the way of new things. It added Rush, Mega Man's dog, his robo-dog, and Rush basically replaces the tools you get from Dr. Light. Instead, Rush just becomes all the tools, like the spring, and Rush can fly and turn into a boat. It's cool. Rush is awesome. I love Rush. Also, they added the slide. This would be a typical move that Mega Man would use in most of the future games. Again, more on that later. Most of the games would have this. And not only did this change the way they could design levels, Mega Man could slide through narrow gaps, but also Slide gives you a burst of speed, so you could use it to dodge moves. So they could change how Robot Masters could fight, and still make it fair because you could slide now instead of just jump out of the way. It was a good idea, and it helped enhance the game just a little bit. Slow progression, but pretty good. This game also introduced Mega Man's prototype, Proto Man, his brother, technically. Oh yeah, Mega Man also has a sister named Roll, like Legends Roll, but the original Roll. This one's his sister. She's a housekeeping robot because I feel like that's a little sexist. Is that just me?
Dr. Light, please turn me into a battle robot like Mega Man so I can go out and help fight Dr. Wily too.
Now, Rogue, how many times have we gone over this? Where do women belong?
In the kitchen,
Doing what?
making sandwiches.
That's a good girl. Now, where is my turkey?
I'll get it right now, sir.
Anyway, Roll's cool though, I like Roll. But anyway, Proto Man, who's kind of a rival in this game, but then ally, and the plots are interesting, but I will stress this about the Classic series, with the exception of a few games, the Classic series isn't very deep in terms of its lore, for the most part. Now, Classic is directly tied to X, and then Legends by further extension, and we are talking about the original first Mega Man that was created by Dr. Light. But to go along with the overall style and flair and colors of the game, the plots tend to be a little more childish and almost played for laughs at times. It's not a super dark, serious game like the X games became. X is a very serious take on the overall story, whereas Classic is a bit campier, I would say. It's not bad, but it's just something to note, I feel. Mega Man 3 is a lot of fun, but I do think they made the game a little bit harder than 2. It's more challenging as a result, and if you're into that, it's probably fine, but I didn't like all the level design choices, and I felt like they could have done more to enhance the overall experience. It felt a little rushed when compared to 2, and maybe that's just me, and that's not a pun on the dog. It's just something that bothered me. As for 4, 5, and 6, well, my big issue with all of these is that it's kind of more of the same. 4's big difference, I would say, is the charge shot, which would also become a very typical Mega Man thing. Like, Mega Man's one of his known things is being able to charge his Buster Gun. Very few games don't let you do that past this point. And this does give you a new tool to work with. Then beyond that, in 5, you get Beat, and there's Eddie, too. He showed up, I think, in 4. and there's new Robot Masters, and what is happening? I'm losing everything. And in addition, there seemed to be more effort to make all these games longer. In 3, they make you go through 4 of the other Robot Master stages twice. Just the second time they're a little bit re-thought out, and then you go through Wily Castle. And then 4, 5, and 6, you go through 2 castles! In 4, it's Dr. Cossack's castle because Wily's forcing him to work for him because Wily kidnapped his daughter, which is arguably the most serious the NES games ever got, to be fair. In 5, Wily's framing Proto-Man, so you go through Proto-Man's castle. It's definitely not Wily's. He wouldn't make a second castle, and then you go through Wily's castle. And then in 6, Wily's pretended to be a guy named Mr. X, and I love his disguise. Like no one thinks this is Wily. Like he's just wearing sunglasses. Yeah. You can just put on a random article of clothing and everyone would think you're a different character. Actually, look, y'all can't come at me like this. It's not the same. He's a robotics genius. I'm a dude who makes horrible videos on YouTube. Leave me alone. 6 also added the ability to merge with Rush, giving Mega Man new abilities like flying and hard punching, really hard, But I feel like you have to really look hard to find the overall differences between all these games. The core game mechanics beyond the charge shot and the slide are pretty much the same. And mind you, when 4 was out, I believe the Super Famicom, the follow-up to the original, Nintendo Famicom in Japan was out. And then when 5 and 6 were released, I'm pretty sure the Super Nintendo was out and they were still making NES games. Mega Man 6 came out in '93, which was the same year that Mega Man X came out. What? I mean, I'm not complaining about making, more NES games. I'm sure there were people who couldn't afford a new console that loved the fact that they could still play Mega Man, and I'm sure they made money off of that. That's fine. But on the flip side, I would argue that part of it was that they figured out they could keep reusing old assets, hence why his sprites never change, while still making games that were, fun enough. And it's weird for me to say that because out of all the NES games, I think my favorite is 6. And I know that sounds strange based on everything I just told you, but the reason I like 6 so much is that by the time they got to 6, they had added so much that it was basically, a fresher take on everything. You have a lot of tools at your disposal in 6, and it's a fairly well-designed game and fun enough that I actually really enjoy playing it, and I like having different options. One of the issues with 2, I feel, is that you pretty much have to address every situation the exact same way, because Mega Man can't even slide in that game, let alone charge shot. So either you have, the weakness or you don't, and if you don't have the weakness, well, then that's what you're dealing with. There aren't that many choices when compared to, say, 6. Which has multiple different avenues for how to deal with certain situations. And I kind of prefer having options. That's just my take on it. And the thing about the NES games is I looked up so many lists of which NES games are the best, and literally every single one of them was almost completely different. And I don't get that. Like, it feels like everybody has a completely different take over which game in the original NES catalog was better when it comes to Mega Man. And to me, that means it simply comes down to personal taste. And I would say, viewing them, all of them are pretty good. The only ones that I would be hesitant to recommend are the first one, because it's definitely aged the worst, just being the first one, but it is worth it as a curiosity, and 4. Why 4 specifically? Because the final boss of 4, Wily's UFO, is what I would describe as unnecessary and unreasonable, just a little bit. It's probably the hardest boss fight in the entire series, when it comes to the NES, not the entire series, that would come later. But it's just dumb, because he's disappearing and stuff, it's annoying, and I don't like it. Other than that though, the series is great. These are great NES games. Based on what I told you, I can't say any of them are bad, and the worst I can say is some of them haven't aged well, and maybe some weird design choices in some places. Other than that, these are fun games, and it's a great start overall to Mega Man. You can really see playing these games why he became so popular, because they're so much fun. That being said, eventually they did finally decide to evolve the character, both in gameplay and in overall visual style, with the first Super Nintendo take on the classic series anyway, Mega Man 7. Mega Man 7 is often looked at as not very good, and I don't fully grasp why it is that that's the case. Actually, this is easily the worst Mega Man game. From a visual and audible standard, Mega Man 7 looks great and sounds great. The games so far have all had great music. I thought that was implied, that's why I didn't say anything sooner. But yeah, I mean, the Mega Man 2 soundtrack is classic, let's be fair. And they all have decent music. And 7 is no exception. They have some great tunes in this game. The bosses are all pretty decent for the most part. They do something weird though that would be done in Mega Man 8 as well, where they split the robot masters. There's still 8, but you can only fight 4 of them at a time, and then the story moves on and you fight 4 more. I'm not really sure why they chose to do that. I think it's because they wanted to make a more flowing, followable narrative, as well as design levels with the implication that you would have very specific Robot Master powers. And I can kind of understand that. It doesn't really matter, I mean, you wind up fighting it anyway, it just kind of reduces the total order you can take. But in many respects, from a gameplay perspective, it plays pretty much just like 8-bit Mega Man. It's just been 16-bit now. There's colors, lots of them, everywhere. It looks very nice, even to this day, and I think it's pretty fun to play. There aren't too many issues I have with it, and I think it's definitely underappreciated in many regards. But I will say that there are some design choices that I don't like, particularly involving 2 boss fights and 1 level. Turbo Man's level is nonsense. I mean, unspeakable nonsense. I do not know what they were thinking with this, but this is no. Alright, I know this doesn't look like much, but follow me on this. So, this jump. Look at this jump. Do you see this jump? It doesn't look that bad, right? You say, oh, this should be able to make that easy. Aha! You fool! You don't realize what we're dealing with. You see those tires? Yeah, you can hit those. They'll bounce you backward. Also, if you hit them on the bottom, they'll bounce you downward into spikes. You have to time this jump so specifically, and you only get 1 shot at it usually. Like, it's very rare you'll get bounced back. If the tires weren't there, or if they were slower or a little bit more spread out, it wouldn't be that bad. But because of this 1 jump can actually stall out gameplay. Like, it's just so... Why? Why would you do this? Why would you ever do this? I don't understand. It doesn't help that even after the jump, you get through pillars of fire, and then they pulled a Quickman stage laser corridor, because that was needed. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I am so appreciative of this. And then Turbo Man himself is probably the worst designed boss, with the exception of the final one. And it's not because of Turbo Man's pattern, or the weakness you need, or anything involving that. It's his hitbox. Hitting him whenever he morphs into a car happens weirdly. Like, he's invincible for 1, which is fine, but you have to jump over him. But I swear, multiple times I jumped, and I still got hit by him. I think his hitbox is still the same as when he's standing up, so you have to jump extra high in order to get over him. It's really poor design in that regard, and I don't like it. That being said, he's still not the worst boss. The worst boss is the final one. According to an artist from the game itself, this is a direct quote from Keiji Inafune, who said, hey, let's make the final boss really, really hard. In regards to this one, this is the hardest Wily UFO in the entire series, period. That is what I'm saying, that is what I'm sticking with, without question. Arguably, this is the hardest boss in the entire Mega Man franchise in general. I mean, I can't think of a single fight, even in Mega Man X6, even Kaiser Sigma in X3, who was also agonizingly difficult, wasn't like this. The problem with this is not only are his attacks really, really obnoxious to dodge, and if you get hit by them, you take extra damage because they're elemental based, because thank you for that, but even if you hit him with his weakness or with a charge shot, you will only ever do a maximum of a single tick off his health bar. This is unreasonable. Unreasonable! There's no reason for this thing to be nearly as hard as this. You might be saying, what's the final boss? It's a Mega Man game, it has to be hard. No, it doesn't have to be like this. This is not needed. I did not need this in my life, okay? None of the NES games had anything even remotely like this. 4's was a pain, but 4's, once you figured out the trick, wasn't too bad. This, there isn't a trick. There isn't a strategy that's gonna make this any easier. It's going to be a nightmare no matter who you are, no matter what you do, and I can't even stomach the thought of actually having to play this without save states or anything like that, because at least with the collections they let you save at checkpoints so you can always reload the checkpoint without dealing with the lives. Because the one consistent thing about the classic series that I think is super dated, especially now, is that they still do the life system, where you have lives, which is normal, but in the later X games, whenever you lost lives, you get a continue screen. If you hit continue, you would always get taken back to the checkpoint, the same place the lives would have taken you. So ultimately the lives are just there for aesthetic. They don't really mean that much because you can still continue where you left off. But in the classic series, no. If you lose all your lives, you will go all the way back to the beginning of the level, regardless of where you were, whether or not you continue, unless of course you're playing on the recent collections, and then you can reload the save. It's BS, because it basically means that on the original Super Nintendo, this ridiculous boss had to be fought repeatedly for a long time, and it was a nightmare, and every time you ran out of lives, you'd have to go back through the boss rush all over again, which, to me, doesn't actually make the fight itself any harder, because you have all the boss's weaknesses by that point. So, it just wastes your time. What's the point? Like, oh, get good? No, this isn't about getting good. I already beat all these bosses, probably very quickly. Again, this is the boss rush. You have all the weaknesses. You probably figured them out if you got this far. So what's the point of going through them all again just to get your face beat in by Wily's stupid UFO? It's insane. Other than that, I really like 7. Most of the levels were fun outside of Turbo Man's, and the game introduces Bass, Mega Man's rival, created as kind of a clone to Mega Man by Dr. Wily, Bass and Treble, his dog, who's a clone of Rush. Like, these are really likable characters that people really appreciate. Bass is very popular, and I definitely think Mega Man 7 deserves a bit more credit for what it was trying to do. It brought Mega Man to the 16-bit. Was it perfect? No, absolutely not. I just told you why it's not. But ultimately, I think it's still worth a play. It's a lot of fun. Mega Man 8, as I said, was my first classic Mega Man game, so I will be honest with you and say that I'm probably a little biased with how much I love 8. But I love the crap out of Mega Man 8, and I think it is vastly overhated and underrated. It is so unappreciated for what it did. To begin with, the game is absolutely gorgeous. It is probably my favorite aesthetic when it comes to the classic series. Because it was a PlayStation game and did the 2D graphics like Mega Man X4, 5, and 6 did, it was able to do some really high resolution sprites. And on top of that, because of the art style of the classic series, the game is so vibrant and colorful. I love the X Games aesthetic, don't get me wrong, but they were darker, because they're darker, more serious plots. But because of the cartoony elements of the classic series, you could make these vibrant, colorful levels that all look distinctive, and they're all a lot of fun to play. The music is amazing. Mega Man 8's soundtrack is fantastic, without question. And honestly, the gameplay feels just like the old games, just done in a more vibrant style. You can still slide, jump, do your charge shot. It's still typical classic Mega Man stuff, and it feels pretty much identical to the old ones, with the sole exception of the fact that it just looks so much nicer. I really like all the Robot Masters in this game. Like, let's be real, Tango Man looks pretty cool, as does Sword Man, and I just think Astro Man is hysterical because he's just got such a personality. He's just so nervous about everything. He's terrified. He doesn't even want to fight, but he has to. It's great. And I just think people really overlooked this game for what it did. It is such a good game. Absolutely worth a play. I would recommend it to anybody, but not without warning them about a handful of things, because it isn't perfect, and I'll concede on that. To begin with, okay, I really just feel like this shouldn't take away from the overall experience, because Mega Man Classic's plot has always been a little campier, so I think the voice acting is hysterical. But yeah, the voice acting's pretty bad. I don't know why Dr. Light sounds like that. Mega Man, you must go like Dr. Wily. In the meantime, be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits. So yeah, the voice acting isn't great, but neither was X4's, and people really like that game. I love X4. And even though the voice acting's bad, those anime cutscenes look great. They're beautiful, and I wish more Mega Man games did the anime cutscenes, because Mega Man's always taken to the anime style. Like, pretty much from the start, he's been in the anime style. So doing these in the anime style really complements the game extremely well, especially when you have such a vibrant, appealing looking game during gameplay.
Actually, this one is the worst Mega Man game.
But yes, naturally the game also has some other issues. Mainly the one everyone brings up besides the voice acting. The snowboards. Now, when they first show up, it's in Frostman stage. And you know what? That's fine. That's thematic. I'm okay with that. I don't really mind that at all, to be brutally honest. That's totally fine. The way they work is basically it's like a Simon Says game. If it tells you to jump, you jump. If it tells you to slide, you slide. And the board gets progressively faster as time goes on. So it's a bit of a challenge trying to avoid obstacles as you move forward. But they decided to put another one of these in the first part of a Wily stage. And again, it's a Wily stage, so it's supposed to be hard, but this is just a little much. This particular part is the bane of like everyone's existence. And nowadays, it's not too bad, but I've been playing the game so long that I don't think that's really a fair thing to say. It's pretty difficult, especially if you're not good at these kinds of things, and you have to get through it. You have no other option. The only benefit is even though Mega Man 8 uses another life system, just like they all do, where you have to restart the entire level if you lose all your lives, technically speaking, there isn't a checkpoint here until after the board section. So even if you have to continue, you're still gonna start out at the same point anyway. So that's something, I suppose. But yeah, it is pretty agonizing, I'll be honest, but we're talking about one section in this entire game. And when that's the only major issue the game has, I think that says it's pretty good. I mean, I had an annoying bit of Mega Man 2 with the laser room, and everyone says that game's amazing. I just don't think people are being fair to Mega Man 8. And again, I'm probably biased. It was my first Mega Man classic game. So naturally I like it more, and I still think the game is gorgeous. So, there's that. I would recommend it. I think it's worth a play. But that's just me. Take from that what you will.
Actually...
Get out of my house! Real quick, I'm gonna talk about the fact that I know of Mega Man and Bass. But I'm not gonna make it a part of this retrospective because not only have I not played through it, don't really consider it a part of the classic series. I mean, some people do, and it kinda is, but it also takes like all the assets of Mega Man 8 to the point of just being Mega Man 8, although way unreasonably difficult, mostly because of screen crunch on the GBA and random game flaws and slowdown, and it's really not great. I mean, you can play as Bass, that's cool, but yeah, it's not really worth your time, for being honest. I mean, Capcom didn't even include it on the classic collection, so what does that tell you? Anyway, after Mega Man 8, it was quite a while before we saw another Mega Man game. They'd gotten distracted with Mega Man Battle Network about this time, so I think that's why they took a break from Classic, as well as X after X8. And yes, for everybody asking, Battle Network will be included in one of these parts. It's the last series I played, so I have to get to it, but we'll get to it, okay? Don't rush me. This is a process. You have any idea how much Mega Man I've been playing over the last few weeks? Every single day, Mega Man. Just nothing but Mega Man. All my friends and I are talking about right now is Mega Man. It is out of control, and I did this for you. So there's that. After 8, and after Battle Network pretty much, we got Mega Man 9, which is 8-bit. What? Okay, this probably requires some context for younger people. Alright, here's what happened. Back in the early 2000s, there was a big, sudden resurgence of retro gaming. Suddenly, everybody on the internet was talking about all the games they used to play as a kid, and I was among them. Part of it was spurred by YouTube, as well as YouTube reviewers like me, and the AVGN, and Armake, and Jedite, and WizWar, and Irate Gamer, I guess, too. I mean, there's a whole... There were a ton of us, all doing angry reviews, not angry reviews, like everyone was reviewing games on YouTube. It was one of the big crazes back in 2007, 2008. I was there. My older fans will confirm I was there. Anyway, but a big part of that was a resurgence in classic gaming. It also helped that Nintendo released the Virtual Console for the Wii. The Virtual Console let people purchase older games, where before, a lot of older games were harder to get because they were older. You had to go on eBay and have an old console, but suddenly younger gamers could appreciate older games without having to go through the hassle of tracking down an old cartridge or doing piracy with ROMs, which was usually what we did when we couldn't do the former. But now we could pay the companies directly and actually buy their games. We could play these older games, some that I had missed out on, some that you didn't miss out on. You just wanted to play it on a modern platform. It was great. It was a great idea. And Capcom saw this and said, there is money to be made. Mega Man 9 was done in the style of the NES classic Mega Man games. Now, here's my issue with it. It's not necessarily a bad game. And in fact, in many ways, I think it's alright. I'll get to my flaws with it, but this nostalgia trip only works if you were there. I wasn't there. I told you that already. My first Mega Man game was Legends, then X4, then 8. At no point during my childhood did I play an NES Mega Man game. At no time. I didn't play those till I was a teenager. So this kind of nostalgia factor really didn't appeal to me at all. It only appealed to people that were a little bit older that played the games when they were kids. So already I was kind of put off because I preferred the art direction of Mega Man 8. I loved that game, and I think even people that say that the game is flawed and have issues with it can concede that it is a gorgeous looking game visually. I would have liked to see another Mega Man game done in that style, but that's not what they did. They went back to the 8-bit style, of which we already had 6 games done in that exact same style. Does Mega Man not work if it's not 8-bit? Believe it or not, some people back then totally said that, and I could not disagree more. That's insane. Are you afraid of more than 16 colors on the screen? This is a serious question that requires a serious answer. I don't get it. I will never understand why anybody feels the need to play a game that looks like it was made on the NES. If an independent studio did this as like a fan project or something, I wouldn't even bring this up. But this is Capcom, a major developer, a major publisher in the video game world, and they are doing this. Why? No, it is not to appeal to classic fans. Well, it is, but it is to appeal and target that nostalgia factor. They are baiting you into playing Mega Man games by reminding you of how they used to be and taking you on a nostalgia trip. Whether you consider that a good or a bad thing really depends on your opinion. I concede that it is a good business decision, and Mega Man 9 did really well. So I'm in the minority. That's fine. But the problem is, I don't feel like this kind of style appeals to me as a modern gamer. And if it was one time, I probably would let it go. But then did it again in Mega Man 10. More on that later. Mega Man 9, looking past the visuals and the music, which is also done in the NES style, though admittedly the music is pretty catchy, is a decent game. Like, it is. Don't get me wrong. I like the NES and Mega Man games. And playing Mega Man 9, it's alright. There's nothing really wrong with it, though I do think they really missed the mark of what made Mega Man so much fun on the NES. To begin with, they removed the charge shot and the slide. Why? Oh, here's why. They wanted to make it more like Mega Man 2, which didn't have a charge shot or a slide. I'm sorry. I thought the charge shot and the slide made the game, I don't know, more interesting and fun and fast, and you had more options. Like I said, I like Mega Man 6 because it gave me the most options, but in Mega Man 9 they took those options away and depowered Mega Man. I don't even know how you get away with that. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Not having the charge out the slide doesn't make the game any harder. It just makes it less fun to play, in my opinion. And if you were trying to emulate Mega Man 2, okay, fine, then you should probably have designed levels like Mega Man 2 because you absolutely in no way did that, and I can't stress that enough. There's so much cheap nonsense in Mega Man 9, like these stupid green diamonds that jump up from the stupid pit. This is not, look, and don't tell me get good or you just suck at Mega Man games. No, the classic games very rarely did this, and I don't think Mega Man 2 ever did it. And if it did, it was done like you got a warning. Here, these things intentionally jump at you and drag you into the pit. It makes the game tedious and dull, and you have to just take your time. It doesn't feel as fun to play as the NES games, even though it looks like them. Other than that, though, I mean, the Robot Masters are cool. We finally got a female Robot Master in the form of Splash Woman, so that's great, actually. I think we should get more of that, if I'm being honest. And overall, besides my flaws with it, it is a good game, and it's fun to play for the most part, and I don't think it's overly difficult. None of the bosses are BS, and I don't think there's anything in here that can compete with Mega Man 4 or 7, God help you, final boss, so hey, there's that at least. I enjoyed it, I did. don't really get why everyone is so gung-ho about it. Some people think it's the best Mega Man game ever made, and I could not disagree more.
Actually...
So ultimately, I wasn't very impressed with 9 as a direct result of its style, but that's me. I can't sneer at it too much because people enjoyed it. A lot of people did. It was critically acclaimed. So, hey, if that's your thing, it's worth playing, and I wouldn't call it bad. As for Mega Man 10, okay, look. If you're gonna do the nostalgia factor once, I'll take it. That's fair. It didn't work for me, but it worked for a lot of people. But doing it 2 times in a row, come on, now you're just taking advantage of people that, aren't you like projecting and like tightening your hold on someone's childhood memories? Is that what you wanted? Like 2 times in a row. You know, if you're gonna do a nostalgia trip, how about this? Follow me on this. How about you don't also include not only the shop from 7 and 8, which was in 9, but then you include a DLC for Proto Man you have to buy, like, with microtransactions? Because I assure you, that was never a thing on the NES for a variety of reasons. And then 10 did the same thing, except instead of Proto Man, it was base. Proto Man is actually available from the start in 10, so that's nice, I guess. 10 is another 8-bit game. It's alright, but man, I think this is the one where they just went out of their way to make everything just brutal. It is one of the hardest Mega Man games in the entire series, in my opinion, all based on not bosses, but level design in this case. The levels are creative, but it's tough. And there's so much stuff going on, just all the time. It keeps you on your toes, and it's almost stressful to play. Now, if you want a really hard Mega Man game, yeah, this'll work. But beyond that, I wouldn't say it's a good idea to play it. I wouldn't recommend it as a starting point either. Play any of the others first before this one. But it's not bad. It's just really tough. Just a fair warning on that. And on the recent end of Mega Man, we can now talk about Mega Man 11. Which is a thing that exists now. Yeah, they took a break from Mega Man for a while. See, after 10 was released, that's when Keiji Inafune left, when they canceled all the Mega Man projects, including Legends 3, which I'm still mad about, forever, eternally. Why? Let me write it! Please! Let me write the game! I need to calm down. Sorry. Okay, so Mega Man 11 finally actually tries to evolve the series a bit, and does it 2.5D style, which looks absolutely gorgeous. The game looks great. It really does. I still lean heavily towards Mega Man 8's high-resolution 2D sprites. I just love that style. And I would have loved to see them, like make Mega Man 10 like Super Nintendo style. And then Mega Man 11 could be Mega Man 8 style, like bring the series up to speed slowly and give everybody a nostalgia trip, but no, they didn't do that. But anyway, Mega Man 11 looks pretty good. And they actually add some new mechanics in the form of the double gear system, where you can use the shoulder buttons to switch which gear you're using. One enhances Mega Man's speed, which slows everything down and leaves you pretty fast, and then one enhances your attack, and you do more damage. All the bosses also have double gear, so that's why Mega Man's using one. This was a thing that was made by Dr. Wily, and you get some backstory on the relationship between Dr. Wily and Dr. Light. We already had a little bit of this done before in the games, but this game really tries to improve on that, and I really appreciate that. The voice acting's actually good, too, which there's also a first for the classic series, if I'm being honest. The game's fun, and it feels just like the old ones, once again. Not much more to say than that, but they got really creative with a lot of the levels, and I really enjoy playing this game. It's definitely worth a try. It's vastly overhated. I've heard some people really don't like it, but I feel like those people are just wanting more 8-bit, and I just don't really get why you don't want to see Mega Man with more than 16 colors. I don't get that. I don't get it. It feels just like the classic games. It just looks nicer. Music's great, gameplay's great, it's a fun experience with some new features as well as old ones. You still take powers, you still use weaknesses, it's still Mega Man. And also, if you're looking for a challenge, this game is so freaking hard. I mean, if you play the game on normal, you're gonna have a really hard time of it because, again, and this is a big complaint with me, they still use the life system. You still have to restart the entire level if you lose all your lives. And I think this is a very critical problem with 11, if I'm being honest, because 11's levels are way longer than any of the levels in Mega Man have been up till now. They are so brutally long. Some of them can take upwards of 10 minutes, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but if you really think about it, that's a long level, especially for a Mega Man game. And you don't get that many checkpoints unless you're playing on one of the easier difficulty settings. Although admittedly, one of the nice features is there are easier difficulty settings. Technically 10 had an easy mode too, so that's nice. And 11 adds two easier difficulty settings, casual and newcomer, which basically lets children play it without much of a problem. And I think that's great. They need to make Mega Man accessible to the new generations. Speaking as a father, I promise you right now, kids these days, oh God, I sound old. Kids these days don't want to get their face destroyed by video games, okay? Back in the day, it was normal to make games pretty tough because they couldn't make the games that long because they didn't have much data to use. So they made them harder, so they took longer to beat. But nowadays, we don't have that issue. Games can be very long. So why make the games brutal when you don't need to? And the thing I like about 11 is that you can play it however you want. If you want it to be brutal and hard and tough and really test your limits, it'll do that for you. But if you don't want that, you have the option to make it easier. And I think that's great. I think that's wonderful, and it makes the franchise overall more accessible to more gamers to get people interested in Mega Man. I don't think anybody, even the gatekeepers who keep saying that they're the best Mega Man players around and nobody can ever beat them, like freaking Mr. that guy over there.
Actually...
Yeah, that guy. Do you want the series to end? Do you want, Capcom to stop making games? Because unless they're making money, they're not going to keep doing it. And there aren't enough gamers these days that want games to be brutal all the time. And if they want things brutal, usually they want them dark, like Dark Souls. But Mega Man has this childish, kiddie art style. It has these bright, colorful characters. It has this endearing direction that really appeals to kids. You need to make sure kids can play it. And that's what they did with Mega Man 11, and I think that's great. And how often can you say, when it comes to numbered sequels in a series, that every single one of them is at least good? That's rare, and I think we can appreciate Mega Man for that.
Actually...
Okay, that's it. I've had enough. I am never going to use this. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.